$15,000, 3 credit cards, all under my name, and I've never touched a single one. That letter, the one the mailman handed me this afternoon, wasn't just paper. It was a verdict, a reminder that even love can write your name on a debt you never made. I stood there in my living room, the sunlight cutting through the curtains like a spotlight on a crime scene. My hands trembled not from age, but from betrayal. Balance due, $15,000. Accounts ending in 8472-9021-7734. Cardholder, Eleanor Hart. My name, my address, my debt, but not my doing. 70 years of life, and I'd never missed a payment, never owed a penny that wasn't mine. Now 3 cards, 3 ghosts I'd never held were haunting my name. I sat down. The chair creaked under the weight of disbelief. I took a breath and opened my laptop. The screen lit my face cold and blue, as if it knew this wasn't just another bill. I went straight to my bank, clicked account settings, then close account. My cursor hovered, my heart pounding, like it knew this click would end more than just a balance. It would end trust. Click. Account closed. And with it, whatever was left of the woman who once believed her family would never hurt her. Today, I lost trust, but soon they'll lose everything. I looked out the window. The maple tree in my yard was shedding its last leaves, a slow, quiet fall that felt too familiar. In that silence, I could almost hear my husband's voice again. Robert, gone 15 years now. Ellie, he used to say, never let anyone balance your books but you. I smiled, bitter and tired. He'd always been the numbers man, and I, the one who trusted too easily. How ironic. After decades of teaching teenagers how to manage accounts, I'd let my own heart overdraft on faith. I reached for the letter again, traced the printed words with my fingertips. Each digit was a bruise, each line a memory of generosity turned to guilt. I had given my son everything, my time, my home, my money. But somehow, he decided it wasn't enough. Daniel, my only boy, 42 years old, a man I raised, to be honest, to count change and count blessings. And Vanessa, his wife, charming, polished, with an appetite for more than she could afford. 3 cards, $15,000, their fingerprints, my name. I pushed the letter aside, grabbed a fresh notebook, and wrote across the first page, bold and clear, the truth ledger. Beneath it, 3 bullet points: who opened the cards, where the money went, how I'll make them pay. For 35 years, I taught numbers. Now I was going to make them count. I turned on the lamp. Light spilled across the table, illuminating the battlefield of my life. Bank statements, envelopes, family photos, and 1 empty coffee mug, cold as the silence between us. On the wall, our last family portrait hung crooked. Daniel smiling stiffly, Vanessa's eyes hiding secrets, and me still believing love was a shield, not a target. I walked over, lifted the frame, and turned it face down. No more pretending, no more blind spots. Back at the table, I pulled a red pen from the drawer, underlined cardholder, Eleanor Hart, then drew a thick line beneath it. A teacher's correction, a mother's awakening. Next to it, I wrote 2 words, not me. My handwriting was steady now, firm, certain. Because if they wanted to call me forgetful, if they wanted to say I was losing my mind, then I'd fight back the only way I knew how, with evidence. Numbers don't lie, but they expose those who do. I closed my notebook, slid the pen beside it, and whispered to the still air, you thought age made me weak, but you forgot who taught you how to count. The clock ticked once, then again, like a heartbeat refusing to stop. I turned off the lamp. And in that final glow, my reflection in the window looked back at me, older, yes? But not defeated. Just a woman ready to balance the books. I taught numbers for 35 years. But I forgot the first rule of math: trust no one with your sum. It was 1:30 in the morning. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the heater and the soft rustle of the wind sneaking through the cracked window. The lamp on the desk cast a tired yellow light, spilling across a battlefield of paper bank statements. Overdue notices, scribbled notes, all bleeding into each other like scars on a life too generous for its own good. Eleanor sat motionless, elbows on the table, face buried in her hands. The air smelled faintly of ink and old coffee. Every breath felt heavier, thicker, like grief had turned solid. Her eyes were dry, not because she hadn't cried, but because she had cried herself empty weeks, maybe months ago. She looked up slowly. Across the table lay the latest debt notice, the cold mechanical words printed in bold balance, due, $15,000. They stared back, like an accusation. Her fingers brushed over the paper, tracing the numbers, the way she used to trace Daniel's hairline when he was a boy. Now, those same hands shook with disbelief. The sound of the ticking clock pulled her backward into the past. "Mom, it's just a small emergency," Daniel had said. His voice smooth, confident, the same voice he'd used when he asked her to trust him with her savings. "We'll pay you back next month," Vanessa added with that practiced smile, already reaching for her wallet. Eleanor could still see it. Her purse, open her hand, slipping out the card. The same gesture she had done 100 times before, for birthdays, for school fees, for doctor bills. Every swipe was love. Every signature was trust. She remembered her laugh that day, light and warm. "Don't worry, sweethearts. Moms don't need receipts." Back then, she thought love meant never asking for proof. Now she knew love without proof could bankrupt you. Her throat tightened as another memory surfaced, Vanessa's sharp tone echoing in the kitchen. "She's getting forgetful, Daniel. She's messing up her own statements." And Daniel, her Daniel nodding. "Mom, you've got a lot on your plate. Why don't you let me handle the finances for a while?" The words had stung, but she'd smiled anyway. Because mothers do that, they swallow pride for peace. "They mistook kindness for weakness," Eleanor whispered, staring into the lamp's fading glow. "They thought I'd never count the cost." But tonight, every receipt was spread before her. Every missing dollar had a timestamp. Every betrayal had a line item. Her eyes wandered to the window. The reflection staring back at her wasn't the sweet, gentle woman her neighbors saw. It was someone sharper, quieter, like steel hidden beneath silk. She rose from the chair, her body slow but steady, and crossed the room toward the mirror by the hallway. The woman in the glass looked older, yes, but not defeated. Wrinkles lined her face, not from fragility, but from years of holding everything together. She placed a hand on the cold surface, studying herself, those eyes, that posture, that silent strength. "If they think I'm weak," she murmured, voice low but clear. "They've forgotten who taught them to add." Behind her, the lamp flickered once, then steadied. The light changed no longer, the warm gold of sentiment, but a cool blue, clean and calculating. This wasn't grief anymore. It was precision. She turned back to the desk, gathering the papers into neat stacks, sorting, labeling, preparing. Each motion was deliberate, each folder a new chapter in a war she never wanted to fight, but now refused to lose. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat evened. She felt something return to her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Control. The woman who had signed away her security out of love was gone. What remained was the teacher, the accountant, the mother who knew that every ledger could be balanced given time and proof. She capped her pen, wrote a single line across the top of her notebook, and underlined it twice, reconciliation plan. Then she closed it, set it square on the center of the table, and whispered into the silence, "Tomorrow, the lesson begins." The next morning arrived cold and silent, the kind of morning that smelled like rain but promised clarity. The clock struck 6. The first rays of sunlight crept across Eleanor's desk, landing on a neat stack of papers, last night's battlefield, now organized, squared, and ready for war. Steam curled up from a fresh cup of black coffee. She hadn't slept, but her mind was razor-sharp. Every trace of last night's grief had hardened into focus. Today wasn't about emotions. It was about evidence. Eleanor reached for the printer beside her desk and pressed print all. The machine hummed to life, feeding out sheet after sheet, statements, logs, account histories. 2 years of her life reduced to numbers. 24 months. 72 pages, one truth. She gathered the stack, lined the edges, and sat down. The old teacher in her stirred again, the one who never left a column unchecked, never missed a cent in reconciliation. She reached for her red pen, uncapped it with a soft click, and began to mark. First page 3, credit cards open online, same home address. Daniels. Each application timestamped 2 to 14 a.m. Her lips tightened. Online. Late night. Not me. Next page. 6 withdrawals. Same card. Same ATM. Always at 3:30 a.m. Exact withdrawals. 500, 300, 700. Repeating every few weeks. She shook her head. She hadn't been awake at 3 a.m. in years. Third page, 2 simultaneous transactions, same date, same time, different cities. One in Seattle, one in Portland. Her finger traced the line, and she let out a breath that was half a laugh, half disbelief. Teleportation. Impressive. Then came the rest, luxury jewelry stores, boutique fashion houses, rooftop restaurants with wine lists longer than her pension file. Conscience must be cheaper these days, she muttered. Circling the entries, one by one, red marks filled the pages, bright, angry slashes of truth. By the time she reached the last statement, the papers looked like a crime scene, a map of betrayal drawn in ink and decimal points. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing the pen between her fingers. The room was quiet, except for the faint drip of coffee into her cup. She could almost hear Daniel's voice again. "Mom, it's just a small emergency. You'll get it back next month." "You must have forgotten, Mom. You said yes on the phone." Forgotten. That word had followed her for months, hovering behind every conversation, every decision. It was the word that stripped her voice, replaced her confidence with doubt. But sitting here now, surrounded by facts and timestamps, she finally saw it for what it was, a weapon. They could twist her words, question her memory, but they couldn't rewrite math. Numbers didn't care about feelings. They didn't bend under guilt or persuasion. They told the truth quietly, mercilessly, consistently. "They can erase my memory," she whispered, eyes narrowing as she flipped another page, but not the math. She picked up her phone, snapped photos of every page, methodically one by one. Each click of the shutter echoed like a heartbeat, steady, determined. Click. The application forms. Click. The ATM logs. Click. The boutique purchases. When she was done, she scanned each sheet into clean labeled PDFs. Folder name, truth files. She plugged in a small silver USB drive, the same one Robert used to store family photos years ago, and dragged the folder across. Progress bar, 98%, 99% complete. But this time, the USB wouldn't hold memories. It would hold ammunition. She slipped the drive into a small velvet pouch and set it aside. Then, she opened her email, attached the same files, and sent them to Emma. Subject line, "Keep this safe." Emma was only 20, but bright and fierce, a journalism major with a heart that burned for truth. Eleanor trusted her more than anyone. If something ever happened, if they tried to silence her, or worse, Emma would know what to do. The send button clicked. The backup was secure. Eleanor sipped her coffee and allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. It was strange. Betrayal didn't always come with noise. Sometimes it was a whisper, a forged signature, a late-night login. Sometimes it wore the face of the person you loved most. She set the cup down and looked at the mountain of evidence. Every page was a confession, written by carelessness. Every dollar stolen was another lesson learned. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned out hours ago. What remained was clarity, purpose. She gathered the papers into a crisp folder and smoothed the cover with both hands. Then she placed it at the center of the desk, perfectly aligned with the grain of the wood, as if balance itself mattered again. Outside, morning light crept across the horizon, slicing through the clouds. It wasn't warm yet, but it was certain. Eleanor turned to her computer once more. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, steady and precise. The same fingers that once graded thousands of tests, now ready to write a new lesson plan, this time for herself. She opened a browser tab and typed slowly, clearly, deliberately, research elder fraud cases. Her reflection in the screen looked calm, almost serene. But behind those eyes, something fierce had awakened. The numbers had spoken. Now it was her turn. Saturday afternoon. The sky outside hung low and gray, pressing against the windows, like it wanted to listen in. Inside Eleanor's house was spotless, too spotless, as if it were bracing for something inevitable. A pot of tea sat untouched on the table, steam curling into silence. Then ding-dong. The doorbell broke the stillness. She took a slow breath, straightened her cardigan, and opened the door. Daniel and Vanessa stood there side by side, dressed like they were visiting a client instead of a mother. Daniel's tie was crooked, his jaw tight. Vanessa's perfume hit first sharp, expensive, overcompensating. Her arms were folded, her smile thin. Mom. Daniel said, his voice already rehearsed. We need to talk. I know, Eleanor replied. Come in. They followed her to the dining room. The table was set with precision, 3 folders stacked neatly. 1 mug of tea, 1 cup of water, and the weight of truth waiting in ink and paper. No one sat immediately. The air between them was tight, fragile, like glass under tension. Eleanor broke the silence. I printed your mistakes, she said calmly, sliding the stack of papers across the table. Every one of them, Daniel frowned, flipping through the pages. His eyes darted down the list of transactions, jewelry stores, withdrawals, boutique charges. He forced a laugh. Mom, you must have forgotten. We talked about this. You said yes. Vanessa leaned forward, voice honeyed but sharp. It's not stealing if we plan to pay it back. You've always said family helps family. Eleanor met her gaze steady and unblinking. Then why did you open 3 new cards in my name? For a second, no one breathed. Vanessa looked at Daniel, then back at Eleanor. You don't understand how business works. We needed a safety net. It was temporary. A safety net, Eleanor repeated. You built it with my name, my credit, my trust. Daniel's hand slammed on the table, the folders jumping. This is ridiculous. You're paranoid. You're not thinking straight anymore. Her heart clenched, but her face didn't flinch. Paranoid, she said softly, for checking my own statements. You've been confused lately. Mom, Daniel continued, louder now. Maybe it's time someone helped handle your finances. For your own good. For my own good, she echoed. That's what thieves always say before they take the last thing you have. Vanessa crossed her arms. We're trying to help you. If this continues, we'll talk to a lawyer about guardianship. It's obvious you can't manage on your own anymore. Guardianship. The word cut deeper than any number on a bill. Eleanor stared at them. Her son, her daughter-in-law, 2 people she'd fed, clothed, trusted. The same pair now plotting to take away her freedom under the pretense of care. The kettle whistled softly from the kitchen, but no one moved. Slowly, Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out her house keys. The metal glinted under the light, each one a piece of her life, a chapter, a memory. She turned them in her palm, then set them down on the table with a soft, final clink. This house, she said quietly, was bought with my hands, my late nights, my sacrifices. She pushed the keys forward. And now you can walk out with yours. Daniel blinked. Mom, no. Her voice was firm, steady, the tone of a teacher correcting a careless mistake. You don't get to rewrite this. You don't get to turn my kindness into incompetence. Vanessa scoffed, her tone icy. We're just trying to help. Help, Eleanor cut in. You forged my name, spent my savings, and now you want to own what I built? That's not help. That's greed, dressed in family. Daniel's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered not with guilt, but frustration, because his mother wasn't supposed to fight back. Vanessa grabbed her purse. We don't have to listen to this. Good, Eleanor said. Then don't. Daniel hesitated, but Vanessa was already at the door. Come on, she snapped. He followed. No goodbye, no apology, just the echo of footsteps across the hardwood floor. Eleanor stood still, hands at her sides, eyes fixed on the door. Then slam. The sound reverberated through the house like a gavel. Judgment passed. Family broken. Silence returned. Eleanor walked back to the table, picked up the keys, and closed her hand around them. Not to give, but to remember. She looked at the empty hallway where her son had stood moments ago. I raised a son, she whispered. He brought home a stranger. Together they called me crazy. Her voice didn't shake. Not anymore. It was quiet, almost tender, like someone delivering a eulogy for a love that had died long before the people did. She turned off the lamp, leaving the house dim and calm, save for the faint reflection of her in the window, still resolute, unbroken. If they wanted a war, they just declared it. Night fell heavy and quiet, but Eleanor's mind refused to rest. Her house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a war room. The air smelled faintly of dust and ink. On the table before her lay a blank sheet of paper, her old fountain pen poised above it. For 35 years, she taught her students to solve problems step by step. Tonight, she was solving her own. In the center of the page, she drew 3 circles: finance, media, law, the trifecta of her new strategy. She labeled them carefully, underlined each, then wrote one word in bold across the top: counterattack. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration of truth, of dignity, of the balance that her own son had tried to erase. She took a slow sip of tea, eyes narrowing with clarity. 1. Finance. She opened her ledger, calculating her remaining assets. Every cent left in her accounts, her pension savings investments, was still accessible, but not safe. Daniel knew every password, every routine transfer. That ended tonight. She logged in, methodical fingers steady. In less than an hour, she opened a brand new account at a separate bank. Different branch, different login, different everything. Then she initiated the transfer. Every dollar she had moved into the new fortress of her design. On the old cards, she left just enough balance to look alive. The predators would think the well hadn't run dry. They'd circle back. And when they did, she'd be ready. She slipped the 3 cards into her leather wallet, one that looked unassuming ordinary. To her, it wasn't just a wallet anymore. It was bait, too. Law. Next, she reached for her phone and scrolled to a name she hadn't dialed in years: David Cross, her husband's old colleague, a lawyer who'd spent decades fighting financial abuse among the elderly. When he picked up, his voice was deep and calm. Eleanor, it's been a long time. I need your help, David, she said. It's family, fraud, identity theft, and maybe taxes. There was a pause. Then, tell me everything. She laid it out piece by piece. The forged cards, the withdrawals, the threats of guardianship, the betrayal. David's tone sharpened. You have evidence. I have 24 months of statements, photos, timestamps. I can prove every lie. Good, he replied. We'll open 2 fronts: fraud and tax evasion. If they used your identity, and if they misreported anything tied to your name, we'll find it. They wanted to play with the law, now they'll answer to it. For the first time in days, Eleanor exhaled. Thank you, David. Don't thank me yet, he said. This will get ugly. Be ready. She smiled faintly. Ugly doesn't scare me anymore. 3. Media. The last circle on her plan. The one Daniel and Vanessa would never see coming. Eleanor knew truth could win in court, but exposure could win in silence. If her voice was taken, the world would speak for her. That's where Emma came in. Her granddaughter arrived that weekend, backpack slung over her shoulder, camera in hand. 20 years old, all fire, in heart. A journalism student who believed every lie deserved daylight. When Eleanor opened the door, Emma hugged her tight. "Grandma," she whispered, "Mom told me what they did." "I'm so sorry." Eleanor cupped her cheek. "Don't be sorry. Help me tell the truth." They sat at the kitchen table. Under the hum of the old lamp, Emma set up her camera and mic. "Ready?" she asked. Eleanor nodded. Emma pressed record. Her voice steady, low and raw, filled the room. "I am a mother. I gave everything to my family, my savings, my trust, my name, and they used it to build debt I never made." She paused, looking straight into the lens. "They called it love. I call it betrayal." When the video went live, they posted it under an alias, "Truth of a Mother." No names, no locations. Just one story, stripped of detail, heavy with truth. And truth spread fast. Within hours, shares trickled across forums and Facebook groups. By morning, it was everywhere. Widows, grandparents, retirees, tagging each other saying, "This happened to me too." Comments poured in, "She's brave. This is my story. We need more mothers like her." What began as one voice became a movement. Meanwhile, Eleanor added one more layer to her defense. Inside her old wallet, the bait, she tucked a micro camera, small enough to fit between the seams. If Daniel or Vanessa touched it again, she'd have proof down to the second. The plan was complete, finance secured, law activated, media awakened. But even the best plans need courage. She stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The maple tree shivered in the night wind, scattering gold leaves across the lawn. Each one felt like a year she'd spent nurturing someone else's future. Now, finally, she was tending her own. Her reflection in this glass stared back, older, wiser, sharpened by betrayal, but unbroken. "They built a trap with my trust," she whispered the words, cutting through the still air. "Now I'll rebuild it with truth." Eleanor turned off the light, her steps slow but steady as she left the room. Tomorrow, the world would begin to learn her story, and Daniel would finally learn what his mother was truly capable of. Sunday morning began with a storm that wasn't in the sky. The house was silent, yet Eleanor could feel a war gathering outside her door. She sat by the kitchen window, stirring her tea, watching rain roll down the glass like beads of time. Betrayal had a rhythm. First denial, then rage, and now retaliation. Her phone buzzed. Notification. Vanessa Hayes has posted a status update. She clicked. "My mother-in-law is losing her mind. She's accusing her own family of theft. Please pray for her." Below it, a curated collage of smiling family photos, Christmas dinners, birthdays, moments Eleanor had cherished, now weaponized against her. The comments were already piling up. "So sad. Alzheimer's is cruel. Stay strong, Vanessa." Eleanor's chest tightened. Vanessa wasn't just fighting back. She was rewriting reality. Within hours, the phone rang again. Pastor Glenn from the church. "Eleanor." "Dear," Vanessa reached out. "She's concerned about your health. Would you like me to arrange counseling?" Her hand trembled, but her voice remained calm. "Pastor, please don't mistake silence for confusion. I know exactly what's happening." But the campaign didn't stop there. By midweek, Daniel had called a family meeting. A dozen relatives packed into their cousin's living room, faces half familiar, half judging. Daniel stood before them, playing the part of the worried son. "Mom's been making mistakes lately," he said, shaking his head. "She's mixing up numbers, accusing us of fraud." "It's heartbreaking," Vanessa sniffled beside him, eyes glistening with crocodile tears. "I love her like my own mother," she said softly. "But she's not well. We just want to help." A murmur of pity rippled through the room. Poor Eleanor. She's always been proud. This must be so hard for her. Eleanor sat still, spine straight, lips pressed together. When Daniel finally turned to her, she met his eyes. "Are you done rehearsing?" she asked. A few relatives gasped. Daniel flushed. "Mom, please. You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Daniel. I'm correcting the record." She stood, voice steady. "If any of you wish to know the truth, read Truth of a Mother. The numbers don't lie. People do." Then she turned and walked out. That night, Emma knocked on her door, laptop in hand. "Grandma," she said, eyes alight. They crossed the line. "It's time we cross it back." Together they opened the blog. For weeks it had remained anonymous, careful, cautious. But caution no longer served them. "Are you sure?" Emma asked. "Once we post this, there's no going back?" Eleanor nodded. "The truth doesn't need hiding." Emma uploaded everything, the bank statements, the red highlights, the timestamps, even the security footage of Vanessa entering the house uninvited. One clip, grainy but clear, showed Vanessa rifling through drawers, shoving documents into her purse. The caption read, "When they said I was delusional, the camera remembered everything." The post went live at 9:03 p.m. By midnight, it had 100,000 views. By dawn, justice for Eleanor was trending across Facebook and X. Comments flooded in. "My daughter did the same to me. Stay strong, Eleanor. You're not alone. We believe you." Local journalists began reaching out, offering to share her story, anonymous if she preferred. Eleanor agreed to one. Not for fame, but for proof that silence no longer protected the innocent. In the feature, the reporter's voice carried her message. In a quiet Seattle suburb, a retired teacher fights back after discovering $15,000 in debt under her name, opened by her own family. The community rallied. Strangers sent letters of support, legal organizations offered resources, and banks began auditing accounts with elderly co-signers. But not everyone was silent. Vanessa saw the post, her face twisting with fury. She stormed into their home that afternoon, hair wild, eyes blazing. "You think this makes you a hero?" she shouted, shoving the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. Eleanor remained seated, calm as still water. "I think it makes me honest." Vanessa stormed toward the study, scanning shelves, drawers, desperate to find whatever papers might undo the damage. She yanked open the filing cabinet papers, scattered like feathers. Click. Hidden in Eleanor's wallet, the mini camera blinked to life, capturing every frantic move. Vanessa froze, only when Eleanor spoke softly. "Careful, dear. Evidence is fragile." Her breath hitched. She glanced back, realizing too late. By evening, David Cross had the footage. "This is gold," he said. "Breaking and entering attempted tampering, combined with financial fraud. We have a rock-solid case." At that very moment, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced down, frowning. Incoming call. First Pacific Bank. When he answered, his face drained of color. "Mr. Hayes," the voice said, "we're reviewing discrepancies in your tax-linked business expenses. There's a pending investigation regarding misreported funds." His voice cracked. That's a mistake." "Then you'll have the opportunity to prove it to the IRS?" Daniel hung up, heart pounding. He looked at Vanessa. "What did you do?" she snapped back. "What I did. You let her catch us. You should have handled this before she went public." The argument ignited like gasoline shouts, blamed the sound of a glass shattering. Meanwhile, across town, Eleanor sat beneath the glow of her reading lamp, eyes fixed on the soft flicker of her screen. Notifications still pinged, hundreds of strangers thanking her for speaking out. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the laptop's light, no longer the fragile widow they thought they could control. Her voice, low and resolute, cut through the quiet. "They used lies to paint me insane. I used truth to draw them guilty." And as midnight settled over Seattle, one truth remained unshakable. Eleanor Hart had declared war. But this time, her weapon wasn't anger. It was evidence chat. The courthouse smelled faintly of rain and polished oak, the scent of Judgment Day. Eleanor Hart adjusted the silver brooch at her collar, a gift from her late husband, and stepped into the courtroom with quiet determination. Her attorney, David Cross, walked beside her, carrying a briefcase full of evidence, the truth, in black and white. Across the aisle sat Daniel and Vanessa. Daniel looked pale, sleepless, his tie crooked. Vanessa, wrapped in a beige designer coat, avoided Eleanor's eyes, scrolling nervously through her phone until the bailiff barked, "All rise!" The judge entered. Silence rippled through the room like a held breath. Eleanor inhaled slowly, hands clasped in front of her. 35 years teaching numbers, she thought, and today they'll finally count the cost of their lives. David rose first. "Your Honor, we represent Mrs. Eleanor Hart, age 70, victim of deliberate financial fraud, elder abuse, and attempted coercion through false claims of incompetence." He placed 3 exhibits on the bench, labeled folders with color-coded tabs. Exhibit A, credit card statements. Exhibit B, security footage. Exhibit C, medical evaluation, confirming full cognitive capacity. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Proceed." David pressed a button. The courtroom lights dimmed, and the screen came alive with the video from Eleanor's hidden camera. Vanessa's face filled the frame, wild eyes, frantic hands tearing through drawers. "Where is it?" she hissed in the recording. "She must have hidden the papers." The clip ended with Eleanor's calm voice. "Careful, dear. Evidence is fragile." Gasps rippled through the spectators. David continued, "As you can see, this was not an act of a concerned daughter-in-law. This was a calculated attempt to destroy evidence after committing fraud and the supposed incompetence fabricated to gain control of Mrs. Hart's finances." He turned, gesturing toward the witness stand. "We have here Dr. Karen Liu, licensed psychologist, who evaluated Mrs. Hart last month." Dr. Liu took the stand. "Cognitively, Mrs. Hart is exceptional. Her memory recall and logical reasoning test in the 97th percentile for her age group. There are no signs of dementia or delusion." The opposing counsel rose voice sharp. "Doctor, are you saying 70-year-olds never become confused?" "Confusion is human," Dr. Liu replied evenly. "Fraud is not." A murmur of approval fluttered through the room. Next came the bank investigator. All 3 credit cards were opened online using Mrs. Hart's personal data, IP addresses, traced to Mr. Hayes' residence. ATM withdrawals occurred at 3:00 a.m. near his office. Daniel's face turned crimson. He clenched his fists, whispering something to his attorney. The defense lawyer stood abruptly. "Your Honor, my clients only acted out of concern." Mrs. Hart's erratic accusations forced them to intervene. They intended to repay the money. "This is a misunderstanding, not a crime." David crossed his arms. "A misunderstanding with forged signatures, midnight withdrawals, and stolen mail. The only delusion here. Your Honor is their greed." The judge's gavel tapped lightly, not in anger, but in finality. "I've heard enough." The courtroom hushed. Even the air seemed to still. The judge shuffled through documents, eyes narrowing. Then he looked up. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, this court finds clear and convincing evidence of elder financial abuse and fraud. Your petition for guardianship is hereby denied." Vanessa gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Daniel stared down at the table, unmoving. The judge continued, voice firm. "You are ordered to repay $25,000 in unauthorized charges, plus accrued interest and all legal fees. In addition, this court imposes a $15,000 penalty for fraudulent credit card applications." He turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Hart, your competency is beyond question. This court restores full control of all assets to you. Furthermore, a restraining order is granted, no contact from either party for 12 months. The gavel came down with a decisive crack. Court adjourned. For a moment, no one moved. The words hung heavy in the air, justice at last. Eleanor rose slowly, her knees steady, her heart calm. She didn't look back at her son or his wife. Some losses didn't deserve mourning. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds, scattering gold across the courthouse steps. Reporters murmured, snapping photos from a respectful distance, but Eleanor didn't pause for interviews. She simply stood still, letting the warmth touch her face. David joined her. "You did it," he said quietly. Eleanor smiled faintly. "No, David, we proved it." Down the steps, Daniel lingered, eyes hollow. Vanessa stormed past him, muttering curses under her breath, heels clicking like a retreat. Eleanor didn't follow. She didn't chase. She looked toward the horizon, voice low, but unshaken. The voice of a woman who had fought and won, not just for herself, but for every elder told to stay silent. "They called me senile," she whispered. "Today, the court called me sane." As she turned to leave, a breeze rustled through the trees, soft, approving, almost like applause. The sound of rain tapped gently against the kitchen window, the same soft rhythm that had accompanied Eleanor through so many lonely nights. But tonight, it didn't feel lonely. It felt quiet, clean, like the air after a storm. 2 weeks had passed since the verdict. The restitution payments had begun small installments, slowly restoring what had been taken. Eleanor's garden was blooming again, azaleas and pink marigolds in gold. Life once drained of color was finding its way back into her days. But outside those garden walls, the fallout had begun. Daniel's company, alerted by the court's findings, launched a full internal audit. When investigators uncovered evidence of tax discrepancies, undeclared income, and ghost reimbursements, they had no choice. One morning, a letter arrived at his apartment termination, effective immediately. Cooperation required for pending investigation. Vanessa didn't stay to see the end. 3 days after the trial, she packed her designer bags and left with a new phone, a new plan, and not a backward glance. Her parting gift, a folded sheet of paper on the kitchen counter, a divorce petition, already signed. By the time Daniel realized what he had lost, there was nothing left but silence. His apartment, once filled with laughter, wine glasses, and shopping bags, now echoed with the hollow sound of guilt. He hadn't just lost money. He had lost the woman who raised him, the woman who believed in him, the mother who had given him everything. And so on a gray Sunday morning, he found himself standing once again at her door, the same door he'd once stormed through in anger. This time, he knocked softly, almost afraid the sound might break her peace. The door opened. Eleanor stood there, in a wool cardigan, hair silver, under the soft light eyes, clear but cautious. She didn't look angry. She didn't look hurt. She simply looked older, wiser, stronger. "Mom," Daniel's voice cracked. "Please, can we talk?" She said nothing, only stepped aside, allowing him in. The living room hadn't changed. Same beige armchair, same framed photos on the mantel. But the energy was different, lighter, free. Daniel sank to his knees in front of her chair, tears already forming. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything. For the lies, the money, the things I said. I was wrong." Eleanor's eyes softened, but her posture remained steady. "You weren't wrong, Daniel," she said quietly. "You were cruel." He nodded, trembling. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't know how I became this person." "You didn't become him overnight," she said. "You built him with excuses, with greed, with silence when you knew better." Daniel bowed his head, shoulders shaking. "I lost everything, Mom. My job, my wife, my home. I don't even know who I am anymore." Eleanor reached out, not to comfort, but to remind. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder, firm yet distant. "Son," she said, voice steady as stone, "I've spent 70 years learning one truth. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's not pretending the wounds don't exist. It's choosing not to carry the poison anymore." He looked up, eyes red. "So you forgive me." "I forgive you," she said softly. "But I won't forget, and I won't open my doors the same way again." Tears spilled freely, now streaking his face. "What can I do?" "Learn," she said simply. "Start from zero. Earn what you lost. Not the money the man you were supposed to be." Daniel nodded slowly. "Can I come visit sometimes?" Eleanor hesitated. Then, with a quiet breath, She answered, "Not yet. One day, maybe. When you come to see me, not out of guilt, but out of growth." He lowered his head once more. "Thank you for not hating me." "I did." For a moment, she admitted, "but hate is heavy, and I've carried enough weight in this life." Daniel rose unsteadily, wiping his face. He looked around the room one last time, the armchair, the photos, the woman who had once been his entire world. At the door, he paused. "Mom, you always said numbers don't lie." "They don't," she replied. "But people do. The question is whether they learn to tell the truth again." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I'll try." "Good," she said gently, "because trying is the first honest thing you've done in a long time." As the door closed behind him, Eleanor stood still for a moment, hand resting on the knob. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not loneliness, not grief, but release. She walked back to her armchair, sat down, and picked up her cup of tea. Steam curled into the air, soft and warm. Her reflection in the window showed not a victim, but a survivor, a teacher who had just given her hardest lesson yet. "Forgiveness," she murmured, "isn't a favor. It's freedom." Outside, the rain had stopped. A faint sunbeam broke through the clouds, spilling golden light across her garden, where every flower, every leaf, seemed to whisper the same truth. Some storms wash away everything. Others make room for growth. The next spring, the city of Seattle felt gentler. The rain was no longer cold, and the wind carried a quiet promise of healing, of new beginnings. In that promise, Eleanor Hart built something that would outlive her story. With Emma's energy and David's expertise, the Silver Shield was born a nonprofit foundation dedicated to protecting the elderly from financial abuse. Its mission was clear and fierce, to turn victims into victors, silence into strength. The small office they rented downtown smelled of fresh paint and purpose. On the wall behind Eleanor's desk hung a silver emblem in the shape of a shield, engraved with the words truth, dignity, justice. On opening day, Eleanor stood in front of a crowd, men and women with silver hair and weary eyes. Some clutched folders filled with bank statements. Others held nothing but fear. They were her people, the forgotten, the trusting, the ones who had been told, "You're too old to understand." Eleanor smiled, steady and warm. "Welcome to the Silver Shield," she began. "We are not victims here. We are accountants of truth, and today we begin to balance the books of our lives." Applause rippled softly through the room. David stepped forward, explaining how they would offer free legal advice, financial literacy workshops, and a 24-hour hotline for elder fraud victims. Emma managed the media campaign, her youthful spark, turning their message viral. She posted real stories, real faces, and real triumphs. A mother's math, how proof saved her pride. Within weeks, their website received thousands of visits. Reporters came. Donations followed. In their first workshop, Eleanor wrote 5 words on the whiteboard. Financial independence equals emotional independence. She turned to the audience, eyes shining. "When someone controls your money," she said, "they control your choices, your peace, your life." Reclaiming your finances is not greed, it's freedom. A hand rose timidly in the front row, a woman in her 60s voice, trembling. "But what if it's your own children?" Eleanor paused, her face softening. "Then it's still theft," she said gently. "Love is not measured by access to your wallet. Boundaries are not betrayal. Protecting your future is the best gift you can give your family, because you teach them what self-respect looks like." The woman nodded, tears brimming. As weeks turned into months, the Silver Shield became more than an office. It became a movement. Eleanor was invited to speak at universities, senior centers, and city councils. Every talk began the same way: you don't need youth to fight back. You just need proof and pride. Her voice, calm yet commanding, carried the weight of experience. Each word landed like a stone in still water ripples, spreading through every listener's heart. One afternoon, after a long day of consultations, Emma placed a small newspaper on Eleanor's Eleanor's desk. On the front page, Seattle honors, the Silver Shield for protecting elder rights. Eleanor smiled. You did this, she told Emma. No, Grandma, Emma grinned. We did this. You showed the world that age doesn't mean silence. David entered the room holding 2 cups of coffee. And now he said, handing one to Eleanor, you're teaching an entire generation what courage looks like. Eleanor chuckled softly, looking around the room. The posters on the walls, the buzzing phones, the volunteers helping strangers reclaim their dignity. This isn't about revenge, she said. It's about redemption. That evening, the 3 of them stepped outside. The city lights glimmered on the wet pavement. A bus passed by with an ad that read, Report Elder Fraud. Join the Silver Shield. Eleanor breathed deeply, the cool air filling her lungs. She thought of Daniel somewhere out there, rebuilding his life, learning the lessons too late, but learning them nonetheless. And she whispered to the night, not in anger, but in peace. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about prevention. As they walked down the street together, a grandmother, her granddaughter, and a man who believed in second chances. The silver shield on Eleanor's lapel caught the city light, gleaming like a promise. No more silence, no more shame, only strength and proof and pride. The sun was setting gently over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The light filtered through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns across the hardwood floor. Eleanor sat by the window in her favorite armchair, the same one that had witnessed every chapter of her battle from betrayal to redemption. On the table beside her sat a single envelope, crisp, white official, the seal already broken. Inside were 3 checks, restitution payments, court-ordered final, and complete. The total matched every dollar stolen, $25,000 plus interest. Eleanor lifted the envelope, turned it over in her hand, and smiled, not out of joy for the money, but for what it represented. Proof, closure, victory. Her reflection in the window looked older, wiser, unbreakable. The woman staring back was not the naive mother who once handed out her trust like candy. She was the teacher again, the accountant of truth, the guardian of her own worth. She traced a finger over the rim of her teacup, steam curling up like a whisper from the past. The silence around her no longer felt heavy. It was no longer the silence of loneliness, but of peace, the calm, after a long and righteous storm. Voiceover low and steady filled the room like a quiet anthem. I once had 3 cards I never touched. Now I hold one thing, they can't take my dignity. Eleanor leaned back, watching the last light of day settle across her garden. The red begonias swayed in the breeze, the same flowers she had tended on nights when she thought her life was falling apart. They were still here. So was she. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Emma peeked through the door, smiling softly. Grandma, dinner's ready. I'll be right there, sweetheart. Eleanor stood, her joints aching slightly, but her heart light. She placed the envelope back on the table, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. On the table beside it sat a small card from the Silver Shield, with the motto she'd written herself: proof, dignity, justice. She turned off the lamp, took one last glance at the window, and whispered, "It's over." As she walked toward the dining room, the screen faded to black, voice over calm and resolute. If it were you, would you stay silent or stand up for your truth? Comment, yes, for justice, no, for silence. The music swelled, gentle piano, warm and reflective. The final shot lingered on the empty chair by the window, bathed in golden light, a symbol of peace reclaimed in a life finally balanced.